Okay, so this is just a follow-up video on our lesson on scope of the variables. And remember, scope just means it's the part of the program where the variable exists and can be accessed. Okay, and the general rule is that the variable exists or has scope in its set of curly braces or any braces that are inside of those curly braces, called like sub braces. Okay, and one note I forgot to mention in the other video is you can't have two variables with the same name in the same scope or same area. So this red code would be an example that violates that. And the reason is we're passing in a variable called number. So it has scope inside of this method. It exists just inside these two curly braces. But then inside of that scope, I'm trying to make another int variable called number, right? In fact, you can't make any other variable called number because you can have two variables with the same name in the same scope. Right, so this would error out and create a problem. All right, so I want to do an example to see if my babbling made any sense from the last video. So here's a basic one where I'm adding two ints together in the sum, and then I want to display the sum. I call the display sum method, but it doesn't work because it doesn't know about sum. Sum currently exists only inside of this main method. So pause the video and see if you can fix, how would you fix this problem? There's actually two different ways to do it. So pause the video and give it a shot. All right, so the preferred way, honestly, is when I want to do display sum, I'm going to say which sum do I want to display. So I'm actually going to pass in sum right there. All right, and then down here in this method, I'm going to take in an int, and I can call it whatever. You don't have to call it sum, but I'm just going to call it sum again, whatever. So I want to display this sum, and then it'll system out print that sum value. All right, and so please note that these sum variables actually are two. One is they are two different variables, right? In memory, if you look, there'd actually be two different spots. And the reason they can both name sum here is they have different scope. This first sum variable up here exists inside of the main method, and then this sum down here exists just inside the display sum method. So it's actually a different variable. And it when you do this display sum, you're not actually passing in this sum variable from main. You're passing in just the value. So just 7 is being passed here, and then it displays the 7. All right, and if it makes it clearer, you don't have to use sum here. We could call this number, so that this int num variable will be initialized to whatever value you send in. Right, in this case 7, and then it'll print out that 7. Okay, so that would actually be the way I would do it because it would tell me specifically which sum I want to display. All right, and then the other route is you can actually move it up. So we talked about this in the other video, is you can actually declare the sum outside here. So if I have to do static, if I'm doing this global variable, static int sum, and then I don't need the word int here, and then I can access sum anywhere I want in the code. Right, so that would have been an alternate way to do it. And it depends on the situation. Sometimes it makes sense to do a global variable. One good example of that is scanner. If you want to use scanner all over the place, oftentimes I might just make one scanner, and then I don't have to pass it around between the methods. But it's really, this is easier, but not, I think, correct in a lot of situations, which is kind of hard for me to explain without having more complex programs. Okay, the other thing I wanted to show you was, if I can find it. Oh yeah, so we were doing this one with score and health, and I wanted to just show you what it looks like in debug mode. And so if you've never seen debug mode, you have to go over and click right along this edge here, and I right click and hit toggle breakpoint, and that's where do you want the code to stop. So, you know, if you have a lot of lines of code, you might not want to look at all of them, so you can stop it at a point. For us, I'm going to stop it on the first line here of main, but you could stop it at a different point if you were trying to fix an error in it. Usually debug is used for fixing errors. But here I want to use it to like watch what's happening with the variable. So that it'll look kind of small font here, but hopefully you can still see it. So instead of hitting run, I'm going to hit the little bug up here to go to debug. And it's going to ask if I want to switch to the debug perspective, which I do. You can always switch back between them. It's up here. I'm going to hit switch, and it's going to switch me to the little bug perspective. And what's nice about this little bug perspective is you can watch the variables over here on the side. All right. So you can see right now in this part of the code, the only variable we have is this args, which is actually being passed in right here. And then I'm going to hit this little step key up here. And actually, I don't know why it's not showing score. That's surprising. To me, it should actually, the score variable should exist right now. I'm surprised it doesn't show that. But anyways, I'm going to step into the method, go down here, and it says no variables. That's really interesting. Well, anyways, the score variable does exist here. Why it doesn't show that, I do not know. Alright, so anyways, now we'll see the player health. Okay, and then as I step into this method, right, so this is the one where we take damage to this player health variable. So if we look, player health no longer exists. I'm down here in this method, and player health only exists up here in main. So you can see while I'm inside of this method, it says I just have this starting health value, and I hit step one more time. And so now I actually have the two variables, the starting health, which came in and has scope inside the method, and then the new health variable. Okay, and then once I return from this method, these variables are going to disappear, right? They no longer exist. Now I'm back in main, and now I just have the player health variable, which is going to get updated with what was returned from take damage, 48, and then just gets printed to the screen. Okay, so that's just kind of a stepping through and seeing where the variables exist and what they look like. Yeah, and then to stop it, I'm just going to hit this, and then I'm going to hit this little thing up here to go back to my Java perspective. Okay, and I highly recommend that debug, especially if you're having errors or want to watch the line run, code run line by line. It's super useful for understanding what's going on. So that went in a little bit into the weeds, but hopefully it gives you a better sense of scope. All right, that is all. Thank you for watching.